Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Workplace Bullying, What It Is and What to Do Level 1 grievance meeting. This is our first training of the year, presented to you by the PGCEA Contract Enforcement Committee. So welcome this evening. Your presenters for this evening will be myself. I'm Tamisha King. I am one of the co-chairs for the Contract Enforcement Committee. I am a teacher at Largo High School. Lynn Romanek, also one of our co-chairs, who is a resource teacher at Samuel Ogle Middle School. Dr. Suzanne Windsor, who is our PGCEA Vice President, Board Liaison to the Contract Enforcement Committee, and also a pupil personnel worker. Mark Naden, a Contract Enforcement Committee member and teacher at Suitland High School. Dottie Haslip, Contract Enforcement Committee member, teacher at University Park Elementary School. And we have Gary Brennan, Contract Enforcement Committee staff, MSEA, PGCEA, UNISERV Director. And finally, we have Brian O'Neill, who could not join us this evening, but he is also a part of our Contract Enforcement Committee staff, who is a MSEA and also PGCEA UNISERV Director. Welcome this evening.
Okay. I'm Lynn Romanek, and the first slide we're going to discuss is when a feud is brewing, where do I turn? The first thing you need to do is look at your administrative procedures, and we have those listed on the slide here. Administrative Procedure 4176, Employee Dispute Resolution, Administrative Procedure 4170, Discrimination and Harassment, and then Administrative Procedure 4185, Workplace Bullying. So when you believe that conflicts are occurring, as we're seeing in the next slide, between Unit 1 members and Unit 1 members, Unit 1 members and support staff, Unit 1 members and administrators, the one thing I do want to say about this is the best thing to do is when you feel a conflict is brewing, take notes for yourself, times, dates, and as soon as something is occurring, when you get a minute, write it down so it's fresh in your mind so you can then follow through to the next step if necessary.
Dr. Windsor, I believe this is you.
Thank you. I'm joining from a cell phone, so I do apologize. I have limited what I can see. So Administrator 4176 is the employee dispute resolution. And you need to consider using this when the dispute is between Unit 1 member to Unit 1 member, or when it's from Unit 1 member to a support staff. Why this is best in these situations? It's non-disciplinary. It's conducted by a neutral outside facilitator. It removes you from the work site, administrators and supervisors from the situation, and it's voluntary for all parties. Things to consider. Anytime Unit 1 members have disputes with other Unit 1 members or with support staff colleagues, they should first try to resolve it among themselves, because we are union brethren and sisters. We want to make sure that we don't get each other in ordeals where we could be facing punitive measures. Consider using AP 4116 if the dispute with a colleague cannot be resolved by the parties involved or their direct supervisor, especially if continued conflict could lead to disciplinary action. If this dispute involves potential criminal charges, serious threats to persons or property, or does not pertain to the official business of the school system, it is a disciplinary issue for the school, department administrator, ELRO, the legal system. Please stop and don't go any far forward with the AP 4176. Key terms you need to remember. Dispute resolution process. This is the process of reaching a voluntary settlement or resolution through the use of a neutral facilitator. And a neutral facilitator is an individual that is trained to provide dispute resolution services with no stake in any particular dispute or controversy other than to help the parties reach an agreement or resolution. So your neutral facilitator should truly be someone who doesn't favor either party, so both people have a fair opportunity to be heard. So the process and forms for AP 4176. First, all parties must agree to participate. Participating in the dispute process does not mean any party forfeits their rights or opportunities to participate in any other appropriate procedures. Participants may not use this process to revisit issues already resolved in a final decision or ruling on a grievance or complaint. Employees are not required to take leave to participate in this process. It is part of the normal working duty day, working time. The neutral facilitator and all parties agree to keep statements made during the dispute resolution process confidential with the exception of criminal acts or threats to the safety of others. Then those must be reported. We don't want anyone to be unsafe or facing harm. The participants are encouraged to memorialize the resolution of their workplace dispute in writing to ensure everyone has a common understanding of the resolution or agreement. Any agreement reached during the dispute process should be provided to the parties and their immediate supervisors. Participation in the process will not stop or otherwise affect any pending disciplinary matters.
And Suzanne, I do want to pop in one thing here, although
Certainly.
it doesn't stop, it is often used as a way, they will take that into account. And I have seen numerous cases where things had become disciplinary, but the employees had engaged in this process, and then no discipline was actually ever put against them because it was seen that it had been resolved through this process. So although it doesn't stop it, it often is figured into the final disposition of those.
So it can have a positive impact if it shows the employees are willing to work together to reach a mutual agreement. Okay, thank you.
And now we have our administrative procedure 4170, the definitions of discrimination and harassment. Discrimination is when a person has, on the basis of race, color, sex, age, national origin, religion, marital status, sexual orientation, or disability, been excluded from participating in, denied the benefits of, or been subjected to discrimination in their employment. Examples of discrimination: denying a qualified applicant a promotion based on their age, gender, race, or ethnicity. Applying progressive discipline differently based on the race or sexual orientation of the employee. Denying an employee of the use of personal day to celebrate a religious holiday. Discrimination and harassment, and our definition for harassment is a pattern of mistreatment of an employee on the basis of his or her race, color, sex, age, national origin, religion, marital status, sexual orientation, or disability. Examples of harassment: repeated sexual innuendos, come-ons, and/or jokes in the presence of an employee who finds them inappropriate and uncomfortable in the workplace. Belittling and mistreating an employee because of their sexual orientation. Posting racially offensive material in the employee restroom. So what's the difference between harassment and bullying? In the Administrative Procedure 4170, it states that a reporter must be a member of a protected class, such as race, color, sex, age, national origin, religion, marital status, sexual orientation, or disability, or a current or previous witness in such a case. Protections are found under federal, state, and local law. Titles, what is that? 6, 7.
Title
And
7,
I think it's 7, and then title, is that 11?
9.
9.
See, I'm
Lord.
so old, I used to use these.
So title 7 and 9, annotated code of the Maryland 20-602 Crown Act. Outside agencies can also address discrimination and harassment, and those agencies are the EEOC, 300 days to file with that agency within the incident, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, you have within 6 months of an incident to file with them, and the PG County Human Relations Commission. Is that mine?
Yeah.
Yes. Process for employee to employee claims. The complainant would complete Appendix A. Respondent completes Appendix B. The principal, supervisor, or ID invites parties to participate in a mediation. If one or all parties refuse, Appendix A and B are, refuse, Appendix A and B are completed and forwarded to the EEO advisor without further investigation or delay. Agreement, mediation success, parties will sign Appendix C. If there's disagreement or the mediation fails, the EEO advisor investigates and forwards their determination to the CEO within 90 days. This shall include the facts and circumstances of the alleged incident and may include a recommended course of action. The CEO then takes action as they deem warranted and sends written notice of the final disposition, which includes the right to appeal to the Board of Education. Request to appeal goes to the board within 30 days. Some helpful tips when making discrimination and harassment claims. Should the claim need to go beyond PGCPS, it may be helpful to have a union or legal assistant in completing your initial complaint. State the facts in sequential order. Gather supporting documents and store them in a private, protected location. Do not rely on the PGCPS server. Gather written or recorded witness statements with their contact information. Also include stories of other protected class persons that were similarly treated in the same way. This may show a pattern. Remember, the process may be lengthy, but you must adhere to all timelines or your complaint will be dismissed. You're muted, Gary.
Oh, while they have no obligation to meet any of their deadlines, by the way, just saying.
This is true.
Well, I will say this, that when we're talking about discrimination and harassment, there are board policies that explain how PGCPS handles those, but they are based on federal and state law, separate from education, right? So there are discrimination laws that are enforced by the Justice Department of the United States. There are discrimination and harassment claims that can be enforced by the state. And the policies that we've just shared with you are the policies that PGCPS has created to meet their responsibilities as an employer under those laws. And so that's why you can use outside agencies to help you. So there are cases where someone might be facing discrimination or harassment, and besides reporting it to the employer, they go to these other agencies that we talked about in order to get assistance and to get advice and support. So that's kind of an important distinction. The harassment and discrimination issues are not covered by the PGCEA contract because they're a part of federal and state law. And then you also have the local government through their Human Rights Commission has a role in this too. One issue that has come up in PGCPS for many years, people would have a principal or another administrator who mistreated them, and they were always told, you should claim discrimination or harassment, and the person would say, okay, I'm going to do that. But discrimination and harassment laws are only if these events occur because you're a member of a protected class. And so in our previous contract about 4 years ago, PGCEA was really pushing PGCPS to do something about the pervasiveness of workplace bullying, things that were occurring, power dynamics that were occurring, particularly between supervisors and their staff, that were not discrimination under the law, were not harassment under the law, and weren't really being resolved by workplace resolution. And so the system finally, PGCPS came up with a board policy on bullying, workplace bullying. There'd already been a policy on bullying between and when it occurred to students. From that, we put some language in the contract that we'll discuss in a minute. And they also came up with an administrative procedure to examine bullying. So what is bullying? In the simplest sense, bullying is failing to treat others with civility and mutual respect. But it's not just any time you get offended or you don't like something people do. But generally, in a workplace in particular, you're required. It's a job expectation that people treat each other with civility and mutual respect, and that goes all around the block, right? It's teachers to students, Unit 1 members to each other, administrators to students and to their employees, et cetera. Most importantly, and the biggest difference is bullying is not limited to those in a protected class. Anyone can be bullied. Anyone can be a bully, right? It doesn't matter specifically that it has to do with someone being in a protected class. Threatening or intimidating a coworker by any means of communication, including electronic communication and social media on or off district premises. So anytime someone is bullying another person, it doesn't have to be face-to-face. You can bully people on social media. If it's a work colleague and has anything to do with work, then it would be considered workplace bullying. If the only way you know this person is through work, it could be considered workplace bullying, even though it never occurs right on school property.
So, Gary, a quick way to put that is don't meme a coworker.
Good point. Don't mean people, don't write nasty emails and send them out to groups of people in anger. Those are all good pieces of advice. Bullying is also severe or pervasive alterations to the condition of an individual's working environment or work assignment. That doesn't mean anytime an administrator does something you don't like or makes a decision you don't like, they're bullying you. Because we'll talk a little bit later about did they have a good intent in what they were doing, or was it a kind of a malicious attempt? But basically, if someone uses their position of power against you for to cause harm, distress, anxiety, to try to get you to leave a position or something like that, then that would be considered bullying. So if someone is, look, people can have their rooms changed. That's normal, right? Administrators have that authority. But if during a school year, an administrator is ticked off at someone and all of a sudden their room is moved 3 times in one school year, that could be someone using their position to bully somebody, right? So there are it kind of has to be, what is the intent? And are they altering the conditions in order to cause discomfort, distress, anxiety, etc.? Acts of humiliation, intimidation, sabotage of work performance, and related conduct that adversely impacts an individual's physical or psychological well-being or work performance and advancement opportunities. So unlike something like moving someone's classroom, you'd have to show a kind of pattern of behavior there. Someone humiliating, embarrassing, degrading someone in front of their peers, that could be a single act, that could be a single incident that would be considered bullying. And again, particularly dynamic between someone's supervisor and an employee, right? So if someone is making comments about one of their staff in front of other staff, that's a kind of bullying. If those comments are to get other people to laugh, to get other people to look at this person differently, to humiliate that person. And importantly, although we'll focus on supervisor to employee instances, because that's mostly the concerns that we see, and as a union, we're really interested in the power dynamic that exists between employers and their employees. But be aware, the bullying policy covers everything within the workplace. So it includes supervisor to subordinate, principal to teacher, principal to custodian, okay? It includes peer-to-peer. And I would argue peer-to-peer would be unit member to unit member, but also unit member to support staff, because we have no supervisory power over support staff. We're peers in that sense. So you could bully, that can happen, where a unit one member could be bullied by a secretary, or a unit one member could bully a para that's assigned to their classroom. And lastly, there are cases where administrators have used this policy to say they have been bullied by a subordinate. Again, a subordinate trying to humiliate them in front of the other employees, one of their employees spreading gossip and rumors about them to harm or hurt them. So this can work really any way. Because we took this really seriously, we have in the last two contracts tried to put in some pretty specific language about workplace bullying, particularly administrative to unit one member bullying. We haven't been able, the system is very loath to be real specific in what we put in the contract around bullying. Their attitude is, we have an administrative procedure. That's the right thing for an employer to do. In the last round of bargaining, we tried to add timelines into that language. We tried to be a little more specific about how this process should work. The system was a no-go on that. They were like, no, we have a policy, we enforce it. We questioned how well they're doing at that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But there is actually language in the contract that requires the school system to both create and enforce policies and procedures to create an atmosphere where no unit one members are subjected to harassment, hostility, humiliation, and bullying. Again, how well this is being enforced is another issue, but I think this is unique. Most locals in the state of Maryland don't have any language on workforce bullying. We at least have something in our contract that says the system has a responsibility to ensure that people are not bullied in the course of their work.
Okay.
I'm going to turn this over to Mark, and Mark's going to go over within AP 4185. There are a number of specific definitions. If you feel you're being bullied, my advice would be to look over these the terminology here, because it'll help you understand the mindset of the equity office when they're looking at complaints of workplace bullying. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Okay, real quick before I start, 40 in the old days, we only had 4170. It's for about 4 years now. We've had this new 4185. The difference, if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, that in 4170 deals with issues of protected class and harassment, while 4185 does not fall into those categories, just into bullying.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Mark. For example, if a teacher, if an administrator, or even another colleague is kind of coming on to someone in a sexual way, making a person feel uncomfortable, they've been told, hey, I don't appreciate this kind of behavior or the kind of jokes you're making in our workplace, that would be covered under discrimination and harassment, which has more teeth to it, quite honestly, and is covered under federal and state law, because that's an example clearly of harassment. But Mark's right, a lot of things don't fall so neatly into that category.
Okay, so let's I go over the definitions here. Good faith, conduct that is honest or sincere based on information available at the time a report is submitted or submitted under this procedure. Humiliation, conduct that causes an employee a painful loss of pride, self-respect, or dignity. Intimidation, conduct that forces an employee into or deters an employee from some action by inducing fear. Peer-to-peer conduct, actions between employees who do not have managerial or supervisory authority over one another. Retaliation, the act of taking revenge or getting back at an employee for exercising his or her rights under this procedure. Okay, we'll look at different types here. Subordinate to supervisor, actions by an employee against his or her manager or supervisor. Supervisor to subordinate conduct, actions by an employee against another employee over whom he or she has managerial or supervisory authority. Threat, a statement or indication of an intent to harm or injure another employee. Workplace bullying, repeated, deliberate, hurtful mistreatment, either direct or indirect, whether verbal, physical, or otherwise, conducted by one or more employees against another employee or employees.
And if I could, Mark, just a little bit on these different terminologies. One thing I will say about workplace bullying, if you look at the last one, conducted by one or more employees against another employee or employees, one thing PGCEA has kind of urged some schools to do is if there's kind of an administrator who bullies more than one people, if employees can file a complaint together. And there's always power in numbers. That's the whole union ethos, right? So if you're at a school and there is an administrator who bullying is their management style, a bullying complaint that's signed on to by a number of employees is going to have extra credibility and extra strength. So we always kind of encourage in schools where there's a kind of a bullying ethos that is something that people can consider. I'm just going to go back here. I did want to talk real quickly. Good faith. Again, that's often what a accused bullier will use as their defense. That, yeah, what I did might have embarrassed them, but that was not my intention. I was just trying to correct their behavior. What I said inadvertently embarrassed them, but I said it in good faith, or I moved their room 5 times this year because I honestly believe that was in the best interest of the students that person was serving, et cetera. So often what a person who's been accused of bullying will do is try to prove that their behavior was actually not bullying, but was a good faith effort and response to whatever was going on at that time. I think the other terms are all pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, so here are some examples of workplace bullying. Unwarranted or invalid criticism. Blame without factual justification. Being treated differently than the rest of your work group. Well, that one. Being sworn at. Seen that. Exclusion or social isolation. Being shouted at or being humiliated in front of others. Being the target of practical jokes. Excessive monitoring. It's an interesting one. Just quick on this one. As you might have heard, there's a teacher shortage. So if this is happening to you, don't put up with it. This is, we have power here.
Thanks, Mark. And one thing I would say too on this is you kind of have to balance, and you really need to do some self-reflection before you make a claim of bullying. So for example, excessive monitoring, right? If you are always, if you're not getting your grades in following the procedure, so you're not putting in 2 grades a week, and it's a consistent thing, and then your administrator starts sending you reminders, that's not excessive monitoring, right? But if you do get your grades in generally on time and you make one mistake, and they then are demanding constantly monitoring you, yeah, then it could be. Same thing, being late. If someone's late a lot and all of a sudden their administrator is monitoring when they arrive to work, that's not going to seem as bullying. But if somebody is on time to work and comments are made about, oh, you always come in at the last minute and I've got my eye on you, hey, that could be a case of it. So whatever one of these, you have to kind of self-reflect and kind of say, is there a reason that this person can say that they were acting in good faith? Or is this really clearly a case where they're not acting in good faith, where they're criticizing me because they don't like me, or they want to look good by getting a laugh from somebody by making a joke at my expense, etc. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at some scenarios and the scenarios on the screen, and then we're going to have a poll, and we're asking folks who are participating to say which of these policies and procedures would be best to use in each of these cases, and it'll say which one. So it could be, is it best to use the employee workplace resolution, dispute resolution process? Should you use the discrimination and harassment process, or would you use the bullying process? So here's our first example. I'll do the first one, and then I'm going to turn over to Amanda, who we didn't introduce at the beginning. Amanda Jennings is our technical support tonight, making sure we don't just go black on screen or lose you all. So Amanda will then share the poll with us. So in scenario number 1, you can read it. Bob's principal pops into his classroom after his 60th birthday and says, hey, Bob, so you are now at the big 60, but you have enough time in to consider retiring, right? A few weeks later, the principal says to Bob, I was at a job fair this weekend and met a really accomplished young lady who had some great ideas about teaching your curriculum. I think it would be a real asset in the school. It would be great if there was an opening for her. And then 2 weeks later, the principal emails Bob about something and includes the email address for the PGCPS pre-retirement information pages as an FYI. So Amanda, I'm going to turn it over to you for the poll. So if everyone would vote for scenario 1, which administrative procedure would be most appropriate? 4176, employee dispute resolution, 41.7, discrimination and harassment, or 4185, workplace bullying. And Amanda, are folks voting?
So far, we've got about 11 people that have voted. about 13 now. That is the majority of our participants who I think are active at the moment. We've got about 19 people logged in. So we've got a couple folks that might still be thinking this one over. Folks want another minute or two. Seems like everybody's had a chance
Right.
to.
So let's share our answers. Okay, so 11 folks said discrimination and harassment, and that is the best answer. Again, could you use the other two? You could, because these are subjective. Maybe someone might say, you know what, I'm just going to use employee dispute resolution to try to see if I can't get this person to stop in a kind of collegial way. However, this is clearly a case of discrimination based on age. Right? If an employer, and we hear this from folks all the time, where employers start saying things to people as they get up in years of experience, as they get older, and people start to feel like, are they trying to coerce me into leaving because that'll save them money, or they just want somebody who doesn't know as much as I do, but constantly sort of badgering you about your retirement, kind of saying, oh, we have someone who would be perfect to replace you, making comments about your age, that could indeed be discrimination because age is a protected class. On the flip side, the same would be true if someone is constantly saying to somebody, oh, you're so young, we can't have you on the leadership team. What do you know? You're a rookie. And they're saying the reason they're keeping you off the leadership team is because of your age. That would be a clear case of discrimination. They're denying you an opportunity based on your age. Okay, we're going to go to scenario number 2. And I believe Dottie is going to go through this one.
Yes, I am. Scenario number 2. Miss Jones, the principal at A. Lotta Drama Elementary School, does a room search as she is missing her Tupperware and 2 glass dishes she left in the staff room. She asserts that she knows who the culprit is, though she hasn't found the evidence yet. She lets it be known around the school that she suspects the first grade teacher, Miss Rudolph. Miss Jones tells another teacher she is close to that Miss Rudolph is disgruntled because she didn't appoint her to the school leadership team. Miss Jones says she would never give a position like that to someone with such low character. Let's see the poll for this one. Would that be employee dispute resolution, discrimination and harassment, or workplace bullying? Go ahead and vote now. And if you would let us know when the majority have voted, that would be great.
We've still got a couple people that seem to be weighing their choices. 10 people have voted. I'll give the last 2 or 3 that voted last time a couple more seconds to make a decision.
Okay.
Okay. There are the results.
Okay. And the answer that most chose was workplace bullying, with dispute resolution coming up second and discrimination coming up third. And Gary, what is the correct answer here?
The best would be workplace bullying, although employee dispute resolution is not wrong, because employee dispute resolution can be used in any case where there's a dispute. The reason I would take workplace bullying is, again, the power dynamic here. The principal is saying about one of the people she supervises, this is a person of bad character. She's accusing her of something without evidence. There's no evidence in the story that this teacher did in fact steal her dishes, and she's telling other staff members. So to me, workplace bullying would be the best. discrimination harassment would not be appropriate in this case because there's nothing in what we shared anyways that indicates that it was based on membership in a protected class. Of course, it could be if the principal made a comment about her ethnicity or her race when she said, this is why I would think this person did it. Yeah, then it could be discrimination or harassment, but we didn't include that in the example because, again, the harassment and discrimination claims has to be based on the potential victim's membership in one of those protected classes.
Okay. We're going to go now to poll number 3 with Lynn.
Okay, scenario number 3. Miss Wright is a new science teacher at Shaky Middle School. She's having trouble with classroom management. The assistant principal scheduled a meeting to discuss concerns. At the meeting, the assistant principal yelled at Ms. Wright and told her he couldn't imagine how she ever got her certification to teach. The secretaries in the front office asked Ms. Wright if she was okay when she left the meeting. The next day, the assistant principal told Ms. Wright he was putting her on a work plan and intended to move her to a portable classroom where her disruptive students would not be seen or heard by others. So let's put the poll up, and what do we think? Would this be an employee dispute resolution, discrimination and harassment, or workplace bullying?
Ten people have voted so far. We'll get the last couple of folks another few seconds to vote. The result should be up.
Yep, they are. And so it looks like our 60% of folks said this was workplace bullying. 30% said no, I think employee dispute resolution, and then one person felt discrimination and harassment. We think, again, workplace bullying would be the best option here. Again, there's nothing that indicates this is based on membership in a protected class. But obviously the behavior of the administrator in this case, yelling, telling the person how could they even gotten their job, then moving her away from other folks and saying, oh, it's because I don't want to ruin other people's classes, all of these things. So you see, instead of this administrator offering this new science teacher assistance, they're using bullying as a management technique. If I'm just mean and tough and scary to this person, their behavior will improve. That's clear bullying, and that is not acceptable under the PGCPS policy around workplace bullying. That's not how you change behavior. Maybe this person could use a work plan to help improve their classroom management. Maybe they could just use some peer counseling with another teacher or go and observe other teachers. There's lots of things that could be done to help this person, and instead of degrading, yelling, and then actually taking action against her as a result. Again, I'm not so sure having dispute resolution would work in this case because of the power dynamic. And honestly, if I was advising this young teacher, I would advise her to use the bullying policy. And then we have one last one.
So Mrs. Roberts has been a special educator at the same school for 5 years. The special ed department chair has been telling other members of the department that she doesn't believe Ms. Roberts pulls her weight in the department and she's always fixing her mistakes. Ms. Roberts has always received effective or highly effective evaluations at the school. Ms. Roberts asked the principal to intervene and to tell her chair that her actions are inappropriate, but so far the principal has done and said nothing.
Okay, this one might be a little trickier. And Amanda, if
So
you'd
based
open
on
that
this
poll.
scenario, what administrative procedure do you think applies here? Employee dispute resolution, discrimination and harassment, or workplace bullying?
Just give folks another couple of seconds to vote and then I'll launch the results.
Okay.
Ah, 92% said employee dispute resolution. Tamisha, do you agree with that one?
I do agree with that one. You could say it's bullying because she is the department chair. It still is peer-to-peer though, because the department chair doesn't have any managerial or supervisory authority over the employee. So this would boil down to an employee dispute resolution.
That's great. I agree.
So I agree with the 92%.
And again, remember, employee dispute resolution doesn't mean that Ms. Roberts couldn't pursue bullying if that didn't work, or if the behavior got worse, or something more happened. But definitely, again, I think because they are colleagues and peers, perhaps that could be a way to kind of figure out what's really going on, because Ms. Roberts would say, look, I am a highly effective teacher. I get good evaluations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the best option. And most everybody agreed on that. Okay, before we move on, we do want to open up a little bit for some questions. If anyone in the audience has questions. And Amanda, how would questions work? Do they need to put them in the chat, or can we call on somebody if they?
So folks can either raise their hand and we can activate their microphones and even let them come on camera if they would like, or if they don't want to speak and be seen, that's okay. They can also use the Q&A option to type in their question, and we can also read out their questions and answer it that way as well. So two options: either raise your hand using the little Zoom raise hand function, or type your question in the Q&A box.
While we're waiting, I just wanted to mention, having gone through this, this is a time to put your big boy pants on. They will come with their heavy hitters, and they will, if it goes far enough, they will try to defame your character. So have your evidence, be ready for it. We have good people too, don't get me wrong. But if it gets serious, they don't take it lightly.
But I would add to that, and those are good points. Right, it's going to create some discomfort. These things don't occur without discomfort. But again, that person already created discomfort, so it's not like there's already discomfort. It's just all on the employee. So Mark's absolutely right. These are not easy things to do. To bring these things forward and try to get them resolved. But also remember, is particularly when it comes to the bullying policy, part of the bullying policy is there's to be no retaliation. And if there is retaliation, there are to be consequences for that retaliation. When somebody files a bullying report, in effect, they're going to put a pause on that other person's behavior to some degrees just by filing it, because now that person is on notice that they're being looked at, they're being questioned for their choices and behavior. And certainly in cases where there's discrimination or harassment, retaliation can lead to very serious disciplinary and even legal problems if a person retaliates for somebody. But I do want to stress, I think Mark is right. Be prepared for discomfort, the silent treatment, the, kind of, just the sour face. But hey, we can live with those things in the hopes of kind of putting a bully on alert. You're not just going to be able to do this.
And I would also suggest be prepared and make sure that whoever was bullying you, you were not in a room by yourself with them. If you encounter them in the hallway, make it a minimal conversation, keep it professional, because they might take an opportunity to continue to try to intimidate verbally. And then, just make sure, again, anything that happens, put it in an email to yourself, to your personal email, in case for some reason your PGCPS is shut down. You will have a timeline of every single incident and when it happened.
That's all good advice. And we've seen situations where someone has filed a bullying report against, say, an AP, and then we were able to get them to make sure that that AP didn't have any observations or role in their evaluation because they had filed that. Or we've had situations where it was an administrator where we've been able to say, look, this employee is not going to meet with the administrator without a union rep with them because of this claim that's moving forward.
Thank you, Gary. I wanted to piggyback on what Lynn said. It's very important that you send your documentation to a non-PGCPS email account, because not only can you get frozen out of it, but they can be deleted. So even when you get back in, those emails are now gone. So I always err on the side of going old school and printing them and keeping them in a notebook at home, but definitely at a minimum, forward them to your non-PGCPS email account.
Amanda, did any questions come in?
We do have a question in the
Okay.
chat. So we have one question. Principals hire their friends or sorority fraternity members, so nothing gets done because that goes up the ladder to the people who work in those offices. What happens if you can't get anything done or they blackball you from transferring?
Does anyone else want to handle that one? If not, I can jump in. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like in any organization, there is a network, whether it be fraternities and sororities or just the fact that they see each other at meetings and things like that. But again, what the APs and the rules try to do is remove it as much as possible up the chain. All of these administrative procedures go not to the school, I'm trying to think, the administrative offices of the school. They go to the equity assurance office, which is under the general counsel, not under any kind of, for example, instructional directors have no role in any of these administrative procedures. And I'll tell you, I get that because my experience with instructional directors is they often see their role as kind of attorney for the principal, which is not really their role. But what these APs do is they move the process to the legal branch of the school system. And I'm going to tell you, the one thing the legal department is good at is not wanting to do anything that's going to get them in trouble down the line. And they are going to process these things from a kind of a adjudicating sort of point of view. That doesn't mean they don't have a bias to their employer. They probably do, but I don't think it's the same as when we do things where we often go to an ID and up the chain that way, where I think it is harder to get a fair hearing. The biggest problem that we're having with all of these APs right now is how long it's taking for people to get responses. The equity office is understaffed. These cases can be pretty complicated, and they deal with not just Unit 1 members, they deal with all employees in the school system, not just Unit 1 members. And they also sometimes deal with issues with student bullying and student complaints and concerns. So we actually have a meeting coming up next week with MSEA legal counsel and the chief counsel or the general counsel, PGCPS, and the equity office to talk about why it's taking so long for people to get resolution to their complaints under any of these APs, because to us, you know, the famous thing Dr. King said, justice delayed is justice denied, right? And so we really have to get the system to look at, it's great we have APs, but if we're not able to actually in a timely way respond when people use these APs, it's almost worse than not having anything, because people take the time and the effort, believe they're going to get a fair hearing, and they get nothing. So I do put that out there because these are not perfectly running resolutions to these kinds of problems. And to just kind of add to that, when anyone's using one of these APs, they should reach out to their UNISERV director and or their building rep to let them know and kind of get some advice and assistance from them as well. But the old boy, old girl network does exist in really almost any organization, and it exists in PGCPS. Anything else?
We don't have any more questions or raised hands, but for folks who may have joined us by phone, if you would like to raise your hand, it's just *9. So if you'd like to raise your hand, but you called in and you don't know how to do that, it's just *9 to raise your hand so we know to recognize you. So hope that helps for folks that maybe don't know how to raise your hand if you're dialing into Zoom meeting. But no, we don't currently have any raised hands or questions in the Q&A.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over. We were going to try to do 2 things tonight. We have 3 minutes left and we want to respect everyone's time. So we might be scheduling a separate training on level 1 grievances or step 1 grievances, how to know when you have a grievance and what to do to get that grievance started. But we don't want to take more time. I know people have to get to work early tomorrow. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tamisha and Lynn, our co-chairs, for any final comments and to close us out.
I just want to say, this is Lynn Romanek. Thank you all for attending, and please pass on what you've learned to your colleagues, the tips we've given you. And if you have any questions, please email us immediately. Always err on the side of caution. If you feel like something is being done, do not react. Take data, write down memos, email it to yourself, email it to your UNISERV. That way you cannot be seen as being aggressive towards what's happening to you. You're just noting that it's happening, and that will be very helpful in the long run.
We actually do have another question that was put in a Q&A queue, and I'll read that question. I am aware of the roles of both general educators in an inclusion classroom. The SPED teacher has 2 plannings per day. I have 1, sometimes none, due to subbing. She does nothing, no parallel teaching, no grouping. I have expressed my frustration. However, she ran to the admin. What is my next step?
Well, that is a case it's not really bullying. That's really an administrator allowing kind of 2 sets of standards. Again, as we always say, the first thing to try to do is resolve it through conversation. It sounds like by the frustration in the question that has not worked. As far as the planning time goes, I'll just say, as long as both parties are getting the minimum, there's no grievance or anything there, a principal can give people different amounts of planning as long as they're reaching that minimum. Everybody's getting the minimum amount, and there might be a reason why special educators get more than someone else. It could be that dispute resolution might be a way to get a third-party mediator to discuss the issues between. We deal with a lot of issues between co-teachers. I don't think our school system does a great job helping co-teachers navigate their work, because it's hard to co-teach when you have a special educator and a general educator. I did it for years, and it's not easy. And sometimes an administrator really needs to get involved and kind of say, here are my expectations for both of you. And the general educator shouldn't be doing all the teaching or all the grading. So those things have to be resolved. But I think for what we're talking about here, employee dispute resolution would be the way to go. But the other person would have to agree to do it. If it's a case where the building level administrator is not responsive, then even though, again, I'm not a super fan of the way IDs always respond to these things, but that would be the correct place to go in the chain of command to bring that farther up and have that situation looked at.
Another thing you might want to consider is, because I'm a special education teacher, go to your special education department chair in an email and say something very non-inflammatory, like, I would really like to get some extra training for myself and my co-teacher on a good co-teaching model that will work for our classes. Would you be so kind as to come and observe and give us suggestions and give us training? And also our vice principal, we have one vice principal that is in charge of special ed. I would send it to the department chair and the vice principal in charge of special ed. So you're reaching out to ask for some assistance, of some training, and try that route for them to get in there and say, look, this woman needs to be doing more.
Those are great suggestions.
I agree. Two more questions, it looks like. Does the principal have the right to tell you where and how to arrange your classroom?
Yes, they do, unless it kind of crosses that border into constant criticism, kind of micromanaging without a purpose. If they're, it seems they're just kind of doing it capriciously as a way to undermine your authority. So again, is it automatically bullying if a principal says, hey, I think you should try to circle your desks better for no, that's not. But again, if it's constant oversight and picking at, yeah, that definitely could be bullying. And I also makes you kind of wonder, how much time does that principal have if they're micromanaging to that level? I knew a principal when I was teaching who used to go in at night and rearrange teachers' desks, which I thought was crazy.
I mean, if it's something around the principal wanting group setup, they want to see, the classroom arranged based on parallel teaching or something like that, then yes. But I have witnessed a situation where a department chair wanted all of the RELA teachers to have their room exactly the same as far as decoration and as far as seating. And it just did not work, and it's not required. And so the teachers fought against that, but the department chair did have the backing of the principal. But once the FAC got involved, that became a non-issue because it's ridiculous.
And on that too, one of the other things, and it was something you just said, Tamisha, made me think of it. Is this something the principal does to everybody, kind of micromanage their space, and that's kind of their thing? Or is this something they're targeting you, an individual, on? In which case, are they treating one person differently. Everybody else gets to arrange their room as they see fit, but this person is constantly being told that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. So you kind of have to look at what's really going on. Has a discussion been had with the administrator? Why are you so focused on this? What are you trying to accomplish? And then the person has a chance to say, this is why I like the room this way, and having that discussion.
As far as where to put your desk, I'm not sure that that has anything to do with, how a classroom should be arranged. If the administrator is looking for grouping and how you engage the students, I don't see where your desk being placed has anything to do with the education of students. So that does sound like someone that likes to micromanage. And I agree with Gary that if that's not something that's happening to other teachers, and even if it was happening to other teachers, it could be perceived to be harassment, because there are principals that are really, really anal about the way that they like to see things done in their buildings. But, as a longtime classroom teacher, the classroom is my domain, and I'm going to set up my classroom based on what works for my students and for me. And if I get a write-up, I'd be willing to fight that and, go to the mats with it, because why aren't you doing something else? Don't you have something else to do?
I think
you have to have something else to do.
If this was something that was happening to a number of people, then it would really be an FAC issue, I think, too. The FAC could say, bring it up as an issue, is to find out why it's happening, and to say, this is really not a good use, and this is why we find this to be counterproductive. Certainly an administrator could make suggestions, and they can do that through an email or a presentation. They don't need to be going in and just kind of trying to force people to arrange their room a certain way.
And we have one last question. What can a teacher do if a student is threatening staff members and admin isn't doing anything?
Well, that doesn't fall under the topic tonight. Student discipline is obviously a bigger issue than that. But if that is happening and a student is actually making threats, my advice would be, number one, contact your UNISERV director. This sounds like a serious issue. You have the right not to be threatened at work, and administrators should not just be ignoring that. So my advice on that one would be contact your UNISERV director. So
Gary, I would add to make sure, I'm sorry, Dr. Winter, I'm speaking as a pupil personnel worker, and discipline is my wheelhouse. Make sure you have documented all the steps that you've taken, that you've done your PS 74. Have you taken anecdotal notes? So you take that to your UNISERV to show that this is a pattern here and this principal is not responsive.
Reached out to the parents, make sure you have all of that documented.
Yes.
Right, and when you do that PS 74, I had to do one last week on a student. Make sure you scan it to yourself, to your personal email again, because that's documentation. I've done 3 PS 74s on this student, and it's the verbiage you're going to use as well. You're going to use something like, threatening a violent attack. Don't sugarcoat it. Make sure you're using those specific buzzwords that is commiserate with the level of threat that you have heard or you're experiencing, and be very straightforward with that. And then also email the administrator on a daily basis. I've given you a PS 74. I told you that this student was threatening. What's happening? I'm uncomfortable. I feel unsafe. Those buzzwords, and always, like I said, email it to yourself. So you
even say that you want a threat assessment to be done if that child is threatening that can't be ignored. Not in the climate we all live in today. Those things need to be taken very, very.
And one last thing is, Lynn and Tamisha, you gave excellent advice. Please make sure when you write your PS 74 that you are not in a state of anger, because this may go further, and you don't want any language in there or anything that's inappropriate, or your feelings and your emotions because you're in the heat of the moment, sit down when you're calm, write that out, because you don't want anything out there that the press could get potentially, or that could go before attorneys or the Board of Education and get your incriminate yourself.
Right, and what she means by that is if you do not say in your PS 74, I yelled at the student, you say I directed the student to do this. I told the student to do this. So your verbiage has to be very passive. You're giving instruction, I'm directing the student to do this. You're not yelling at them, you're not getting angry. You have to take all that emotion out of that when you write that PS 74. So if you have to do a draft first of everything that happened and all your emotions are in there, then do the final and make sure all those emotions are taken out.
And be as specific as you can on what the student did. And that means including if they used, very derogatory cuss words, you can include them, right? Don't feel that you need to be polite in saying what the student said. If the student called you or used the F word, you can write that in. If you're one of those people that doesn't ever use cuss words, you can say the F word or whatever, but don't, I think it was Lynn said, don't sugarcoat what occurred. Don't underplay the threat or the language that was used.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, particularly as like Gary just said, regarding that student and their actions, because that is going to show the heightened level of potential danger that student is exhibiting, and how you as the educator and the adult are keeping calm, cool, and collected, but this student is still exhibiting a threat that is of an extreme nature.
We also have a raised hand, I believe, or I think they may have also logged off. I apologize.
Right. Misha, you want to close the meeting, training?
Okay, I would like to thank everybody for attending this evening. We will have a couple more trainings on administrative procedures and how to address certain things happening within your individual schools. So once we advertise for those, we put the announcements in our weekly PGCEA newsletters that comes out on Wednesdays. Please make sure that you spread the word to your colleagues so that these trainings and this information can benefit more than just a few people. So once again, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for registering. Thank you for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.